So question 6 of the May 2018 AS paper 1 Edexcel. So we've got a nice sketch of a graph here, so we just sort of look at it and think, oh, it's a quadratic question, which it is, but we're actually plotting something meaningful here rather than just a y. It's actually the profit of a company, okay, and this company is selling toys, okay. So let's have a look at what this graph actually means in real context, okay. If we look at this graph and we chose this selling price for the toy, we would get the most amount of profit. This would be our maximum profit, just like we normally call on quadratics like this parabola shape, and it's an upside down parabola, that would be a maximum, okay. In this case it's the maximum profit that the company could make, okay. So let's just have a look at a couple of other places, okay. Let's say we chose a value here for the selling price of the toy, okay. Well, that would mean that we would be making a loss. Our profit would be negative, which means we're making a loss, so we wouldn't want to choose that selling price of the toy, okay. Maybe one other thing is if you had a particular value of profit here, there would be two ways of making that profit, okay, two different values of x, which is consistent really with most of our quadratic questions, okay. That kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into thinking about the quadratic in real terms in an everyday context, okay. So the question is broken down into parts. Part A is fairly straightforward. We don't even really need the graph here. It says explain why £15 is not a sensible selling price for the toy. Well, that's easy. We just go and stick 15 into our formula and see what profit we would make. Okay, so it's going to be 100 minus 6.25, 15 minus 9 squared, and we just pop that into our calculator. And when you pop that into your calculator, you get minus 125. Okay, so that should make sense why that's not a sensible selling price of the toy. We're going to get a negative profit, which means we're going to get a loss. So moving on to part B, it says given that the company made an annual profit of more than £80,000, find according to the model the least possible selling price for the toy. Okay, so if I go back to the graph, that is equivalent of putting a line across here where this is 80,000. Okay, the values are in thousands, it mentions that up here, so this really is just looking at where this is 80. Okay, and you can see that there's 2 points where it's exactly 80, and any of these in between these two values would give you a profit more than 80,000, which is what we want here. Okay, so again we use the formula, but we plug in the value of 80 on the left hand side. Be careful not to put 80,000 in. You know, this 100 here is 100,000 because it says so in the question. Okay, so we put 80 in and copy the rest of this. Okay, and we basically solve this. So if we subtract 100 from both sides, we get this. Divide both sides by the minus 6.25. Square root both sides. And don't forget, really, it's plus or minus. When you've got a square root, when you square root a number, you can have a positive or negative answer. Okay, so now if we just bring that minus 9 across, we get this answer, which of course we can just put in our calculator. So in terms of interpreting it, 9 plus root 3 over 2 would be this one here, okay, because it's the larger one, and 9 minus root 3 over 2 would be this one here. Okay, now all you've got to do is whenever you're doing quadratics and you get two answers, you've got to just think about, well, what are they actually asking for? You know, which one is appropriate? Is it both answers? Is it one answer? When we look at the question, it says the least possible selling price. Okay, so that's going to be the one that's furthest to the left. Okay, so our final answer here is going to be whatever 9 minus root 3.2 is on a calculator. Okay, so when we pop that into the calculator, it's approximately, well, it's just over 7.21. If you go over to your graph here, if we chose 7.21 itself, Okay, that would be a little bit to the left of the answer, and that would actually give us a profit that is slightly under 80,000. Okay, this question wants us to make sure that we get more than 80,000. So the correct answer here is £7.22. I think if you put £7.21 as your final answer, I'm not sure how many marks you would drop without looking at the mark scheme. Okay, but I hope that makes sense. Where you've got to be careful with rounding. You can't just go and round stuff up or down willy-nilly. You have to think about it. Okay, so £7.21 would actually give you a value slightly under 80,000. So I've cleared the screen so that we can have a look at part C. Okay, so it says the company wishes to maximise its annual profit. All companies would want to maximise their annual profit. Okay, so the coordinate that we looked at the beginning, okay, we said look, this is the maximum of this quadratic, okay, and the maximum profit is going to be the value of P, and the x coordinate of that maximum point is going to be the selling price that the company should sell it at. Part I and part II, we're really just finding both of those coordinates. So this is going to be the P coordinate of that point, and then part II is the x coordinate of that point. Okay, now this is only 2 marks, this question, because this quadratic is already in the form that we want it to be in. It's in completed square form. Okay, so what we want to do is, if you look at this, it's 100 and then subtract something, and this something is always going to be positive, because the bracket x minus 9, when we square it, it's always going to be positive or 0. Okay, and if you think about it, to maximize your profit, okay, in this particular model, you want 100 take away 0. You don't want anything to come off of that 100. So if we plug in the value x equals 9 into this, then we're going to get 100 minus 0, which is exactly what we want, and that basically gives us our coordinate. The x coordinate is 9 and the y or p coordinate is going to be 100. Notice I didn't really do any kind of algebra or anything there, or calculations. I didn't get the calculator out. You can just read these off, okay, and this is x equals £9. Notice that my answer to part I is 100,000 because of this here. Okay, it's not a £100, it's £100,000.